Good day, Skyline. So, this is the second video, technically, though the first was definitely kind of like an intro, welcome to thing. This is more commentary, and so I'll be doing a series of different commentaries as well as food reviews in the coming whatnot. So, but until then, today is the politics of queer dating and Thanksgiving leftovers. This one's this one's currently my favorite because it's the morning time and I'm hungry. Okay, so there was an this video will go up largely without any edits, without any, popping stuff in and things like that. But I do plan on getting better continuously as this goes along. To have all the cute little neat things that I point to and they pop up, and then like the screen changes, and then you see something else and memes and such. But until then, I'll just reference them. So, there is a profile on Instagram that I follow called Hot Mesbian, and so a lot of times they'll post things such as cute memes that relate to being, lesbian in just modern life. I do not identify as a lesbian. I identify both in my gender and in my sexuality as queer. Just because I recognize that they are very fluid, that they are changing, that at different points in time I feel more connected to certain demographics than I do to others, and how that flows in between them in my existence and with my perspective as a black femme. So, that being said, but I noticed with that, and also with a couple of other things that have been coming up with people conversing over, so like queer relationships. And when one person feels as thus they have to change the dynamic of what the relationship looks like for their career betterment or for their family's sake or so on and so forth. Now, with the caveat that everybody is allowed to do what's best for their lives, right? And nobody else gets to make that determination for them. I personally have been on the receiving end of a lot of people wanting to change our dynamic so that rather it's their family, rather they consider it their future, rather they consider it their career, they are changing it so that it looks more heteronormative, so that it looks like something that's more agreeable with society, so that it looks like something that they can put their time and attention into so that they may be more easily accepted. I find that when it comes to people who identify as studs and typically people who identify as femmes, it becomes very pushed on that front as well. If you're a stud, then you can't be with another person who identifies as a stud because then that's extra gay. And literally that concept, I'm just trying to get people to see that that's an extremely, you're trying to make your something that's different, you're something that's being prosecuted, that's being looked down upon, into something that looks normative, into something that looks like what everybody else is doing, into something that looks like, oh, well, it's not, that way, it's more like this. And trying to push that acceptance by outside people who, again, don't control your life. I get social pressure is a real thing. Social pressure does absolutely make people feel. Gotta take a step and take a bite of these collard greens because this is commentary and leftovers. It does absolutely feel like a weight, like a confinement of what other people are telling you you have to do, of what other people are telling you have to say, of what other people are telling you you have to look like. And we have that when it comes to our relationships, when we have that other person in our lives and we're like, oh, well, it shouldn't be like this, or it should be like this. And here's the fun fact, guys. It doesn't have to, or it shouldn't be anything. Like, it can be whatever it is that works for you as a unit. It can look like whatever works for y'all as a unit. It doesn't have to be anything. So, continuing on with that point, a lot of times in gay culture, you find that there is a stigma about being the bottom. And I'm just like, okay, for one, if there were no bottoms, then there would be no tops, because who the top's supposed to bottom if there ain't no bottoms? So there's that. But then also, why does it have to be a bad thing? Why does it have to be derogatory? Like, and this isn't so much necessarily about that normative structure. My opinion is that comes in much more when it comes to the internalized misogyny that we all have, like, pushed inside of us, right? Because what you're saying is that, and sorry, I don't want to get too off track, but I do want to get this point done. What you're saying is that, oh, well, the bottom position, the lower position, has to be thus of a feminine or of a quality in which we attribute to women. And since women are lower, then obviously that has to be the lower, more degrading position. And I'm like, okay, for one, stop degrading women. Stop thinking that, like, women are lower. Stop thinking that there's something wrong with women. And in conjunction, because femininity, like, can be separate from being a woman, stop thinking that femininity is inherently evil or wrong or bad as well. Like what the hell? And just because we are on this point, softness, like, rather you are soft and rather you are hard, is also not a bad thing, and is also attached to all of this ingrained internal misogyny that we have that keeps running through the rest of this. Like, why can't people just be people? Why can't you just like the thing that you like? Why can't you just enjoy the thing how you enjoy it and do the things that you want to do, as long as they do not harm other people and they are, in a way, a healthy thing? Like, so back to my point. So this femme has to be on the bottom. It has to be, whatever. Has to be soft. Has to be lower, has to be this thing. And then masculinity also has to be this other thing that we hold into an opposite counterpart. Which also, by the way, guys, these things don't have to be opposite. They're actually just different from one another. They are different from one another, and they are up to the individual to decide what those differences are. So, coming back together, the politics of queer dating, which has to do with all of these subjects, right? Basically, at the end of the day, we are letting all of these toxic learned behaviors that have processed through our society as a whole, or at least mainstream society. And I say mainstream society because I believe that there are portions of society that are dedicated more towards communication, that are dedicated more towards understanding consent, that are dedicated more towards understanding and having people feel safe within themselves, and having people grow and learn and develop their intelligence and develop their emotional intelligence, and just all these things that are pushing forward in other directions. And there are those communities out there, and there are those groups of people, but mainstream society wants to continue to degrade women, wants to continue to uphold white supremacy, wants to tell you that colonization wasn't just thievery, and it didn't result in many sexual assaults and death and genocides of multiple groups of people, or the attempt, because all those groups of people are still around, and that'll be a different video, but I'm gonna keep to my point here. Let's take another bite. Oh, it was a big one. Okay, so step one, right? And queer people have been around since the beginning of time. So it's not some new thing that just appeared. It's not some new idea that just happened to be in the making. Queer people have always been around. And again, it's only this colonized white supremacical system that then tells us, like, this must be something new. Which really honestly doesn't make sense, because even in Roman times, like, there's a very well documented like source of like people not just being heterosexual. And then again, multiple other cultures have always given validity to other genders, have always given validity to the fact that your normal may not look like other people's normal, and like that being perfectly fine, that being like praised even and encouraged. But history stuff. So we are trapped, right, in this system that tells us limited information so that they can guide our thoughts towards this one place. And then in that one place, we try to create other structures within it to then divide people so that it looks closer like this other thing. But again, this other thing is toxic. This other thing is filled with lies. This other thing that is our heteronormative, regular, everyday, like, ideas, is full of oppression and hurting people. So there's that. But then we take that into like the queer community, and then we just kind of make our own versions of it so that we can continue to hurt people, so that we can continue to oppress people, so that we can continue to do this thing and try to make this thing look like this thing so that we can feel like we're a little bit more accepted. And it doesn't work out for anybody, honestly. Like, the world in general, what we see the most of are filled with people who are trapped in thinking that this thing is right. The normal, everyday, colonistic, blah, 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 words. This thing is what we should obtain. And so when we do those things, like, oh, well, we can no longer have a sexual relationship because I'm going to be monogamous with my boyfriend, it's like, but why? It's, again, if that's what you feel you need to do because that is where you're being drawn, there's nothing wrong with you doing what's right for you. But really actually sit down and think about those things. Really actually try to break apart the reasons why you're doing this thing and you may be hurting this other person. I mean, I just kind of keep seeing it in different references where we're just striving so hard to look like this thing. Um, this thing is horrible, honestly. It's again, that probably is a different video, huh? Because I'm not trying to take up all y'all time, and I am trying to eat my leftovers. So there's that. Like, really though, if I just had a plate of collard greens, I'd be set. But ultimately, guys, like, figuring out what's right for you is an individual process, and it's a hard individual process, and it takes a long time, and it takes some experimentation, and it takes some getting out there and trying out different things and failing a lot of times, and sometimes not liking those things at all, and just being like okay with it, okay with experimenting, okay with figuring out, okay with getting through these things, so that at the end of the day you can come back and decide what is right for you, and stop dragging other people through the mud and like completely diverging like on everything. You're not responsible for other people's emotions, right? But you can be considerate, and that's all I'm saying. Don't just assume that, oh, well, they'll be fine, they got it all wrapped up, blah, 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 blah. Like, you can take it to them honestly, especially if you're in a partnership. Like, if you are in a partnership already, then you can come in together, have this conversation, and at the end of the day that you don't match and you don't click, just be like, you know what, that's okay too, and you deserve to live your life, and I deserve to live my life, and like, continue on that way. Like just, all right, bye, let's go. And yeah, instead of doing it specifically so that you can look like this thing that's already accepted, because this current world just accepts a lot of things that are unhealthy, that are manipulative, that are toxic, that are non-consensual. Like, why do you want to look like this thing? But okay, I mean, subscribe, tell your friends, come join the skyline. My skyline is always more beautiful with you in it. So follow me on Instagram, Twitter. I've got a Patreon. I've got a website, and I will put those links in the fucking description. So pretty excited about this, guys, and hope that it continues. So, and I'll get better on my editing, promise. Okay.